The right bloody review. Where's that? Let's stick the caption up. Oh, here we are. Old King's Crown Broken Meeple review. Here we are.
Oh, this will be fun.
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I devote my time to ranting and raving about board games, but usually more the latter part. Well, this one's got people into a bit of a fritz lately. Yeah, this one was followed apparently quite heavily on Kickstarter, but you know me, I don't tend to pay attention to Kickstarter much, so I knew this by title and just like, oh, it's another popular one that I've heard of, but that was about it. I didn't really follow it much more. Then it appeared at the UK Games Expo for actually all people to see. It was at the press event and all that, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, this is like, you know, really nice illustrations and stuff. I think the designer and the illustrator are the same person in this case. And, you know, I thought, okay, let's see, tricksy cards and, you know, a nice looking board and that, you know, 2-hour playtime apparently. And so I'm like, okay, I'm intrigued. So I tried to loan a copy of it while I was there just to basically try it out. And they gave me a review copy, so very much thanks for that. So it gave me a chance to finally crack into this, pretty much completely blind as to what was going on, and just see what's what, and see if this is a game that deserved a lot of that initial buzz.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
The Old King's Crown is a confrontational, tricksy card game. It's got a few little mechanics in there, so it's difficult to describe it as one thing. But essentially, you're going for the most victory points, go figure. But this is done over the course of 5 rounds, and this is a low-scoring game, so you will probably end up with no more than, say, 15 to 18 victory points on average in the course of the whole game, so every point matters. Over the 5 rounds, they play in very much the same sequence. You essentially have a hand of cards with this beautiful artwork, more on that later, but these tarot cards that have number values, some abilities for commands, and a couple of little stat icons for the use of other actions in the game. Over the course of the round, firstly, you will grab kingdom cards. These kingdom cards are effectively special abilities that you can have just for yourself. It increases the asymmetry in the game. You will blind bid for these using the cards that you have, and the highest value will get to pick first and so forth. But the card that you get locks into the bottom of your board, like so. If you can see it down here, flunk. Nope, probably not. Let's get it up here. Here we go. So it will lock in, and you'll have the kingdom card on top. And so what that essentially does is not only do you have the ability, but in case somebody decides to use their bidding card to steal it from another player, that's your defense value, shall we say. Once everybody has got their various bids, you now have to deal with the center on the board. So the center on the board is broken into sections where you essentially have 2 locations in 3 different regions. The regions are rows. Players will simultaneously play their bidding cards face down, 1 on each row, and the idea is that the value will represent their combat value. You can put out little supporter meeples as well to increase the value, but predominantly it's going to be supporters plus the value of the card. Now these cards have little commands like ambush and flank and retreat, which allow you to do various shenanigans with the different regions, like move 1 card to another place, or take 1 back into your hand, put 1 from your hand, you know, little tweaks like that, possibly even nuke the other cards in the area, more on that one a bit later. But predominantly what you're trying to do is sort of psych out the opponents, try to hide your true intentions, and obviously try to win the various combats that go on. They call them clashes, because winning the clashes is your primary way of getting those victory points. Once players have placed out their cards, after a bunch of actions, which are broken down into seasons, so in one round it's spring, and then it's summer, and then it's autumn, you will then reveal one by one the different clashes that are going to take place. These cards will get revealed and you'll compare the values, do any day and night actions as per the cards, but at the end you are basically going to have a score for each player that is in the clash, which is everybody. Everybody essentially chimes in, and the highest value will win the clash, get some victory points, and a location bonus award. Once all the 3 clashes are done, you then move on to autumn, where you do autumn actions as per all your board and abilities, but you get to do 2 other actions. One of them is govern, which basically has you placing cards into this council board, and the 3 council sections have different abilities like get more points or retrieve lost supporters, etc., all based on the number of votes you have, which is a hammer symbol on the card. You can then also journey, which is another action you can do with your cards, which essentially takes account of the scroll symbols on the cards, and this is how you can buy additional cards. Everybody's starter deck is basically the same, but you can purchase additional unique cards to your faction in order to like better your hand or give yourself more abilities. And then winter is just a cleanup phase. This whole sequence of play, from bidding on kingdom cards, doing the clashes, doing various actions, govern and journey, is repeated throughout the 5 rounds. But throughout you are trying to manipulate your cards in such a way to make the best use of them on clashes, but also not cycle through them too quickly, because unlike other sort of deck building style games, you have an attrition value, which means that every time you have to shuffle your discard pile back into your deck, you have to turn this down and your hand size decreases. So the more you keep going through your deck, the worse your hand size is. You're kind of incentivized to get stuff back into your deck, or shuffle your discard pile back into your deck by other means. Then some of these location bonuses will help you do that. Once you've done the 5 rounds, you then just simply total up the influence points that everyone's collated, and of course, the one with the most.
Of course!
So let's talk value and production first. At the moment, UK websites are pre-ordering this for around the £55 mark, 55, 60 tops. That's not bad actually for what you get in here. Firstly, the artwork is gorgeous, although it is a stylistic form of artwork. So I gather that some people are going to look at this and maybe not think it's that particularly good. I, for one, kind of like it. It's kind of reminds me of sort of like the French comic book style artwork, but for this fantasy setting, I mean, I will put that in if quotes because the theme is kind of a pasted on affair, it does look the part. These tower cards have got really nice imagery on them that are unique to factions. So your starter deck, yes, they'll have the same abilities and everything, but they're going to look different to other players. These do look really nice, and I will just spend half my time staring at the pictures rather than actually caring what's on the card. And the kingdom cards, well, it just gets better as you go through them, because you've got about 50 of these cards in the game, each one with their own unique bit of artwork. Every single one is unique, and again, these are great pictures. I could totally see myself reading like a sort of a medieval or fantasy style comic book with these, I mean, honestly, yeah, the artwork is very nice, but it's a bit like asking people to like the Miko's artwork from the Garfield Games series. It's definitely a stylistic form of artwork, and some people like it, some people don't.
Oh, Jesus!
I'm not a massive fan of Leader Games' artwork that they use in their stuff, like Root and that, but it's not bad. I'm just not that big a fan of it. But, some people love it to bits. It's going to be the same here. The rest of the production is not bad at all, actually. I mean, you've got big wooden pieces, you've got screen printed other bits and bobs, but the only bits that are kind of a bit lacking is the player boards are a little bit basic in how they look. I mean, they're just basically a solid colour with a pattern on it, but they are dual layer, and I do like the fact that they've got the sort of like groove section at the back, so that when you place a card in, it basically, whilst it's flat, will sit in that groove, a bit like how they do in Lisboa, so that's at least a nice touch. Other components, though, is standard cardboard, the standard little tokens, but yeah, there's, the component side is nothing to really shout home about. It's mostly the artwork.
It's amazing what you've done with such a modest budget. I like that boulder. That is a nice boulder.
Now, the reason for the intro at the start is because when I was playing this game and learning it, one game sprouted to mind as what it was reminding me of. And in many ways, both good and bad, throughout this review, you're going to see me reference to Arcs. This was a game I reviewed a few months back, I believe, about middle of last year, that was hyped up by a lot of people, and I considered it meh. I gave it a 5 out of 10. I've done a massive review on it. I've dealt with the backlash from the mega fans, but I've also dealt with the support from the people who agree with me. It's a very divisive game, a Marmite game. This one is going to be very much like that for a lot of people, as you'll see why. So what's the good side of that? Well, firstly, the card system. The card system, alongside the kingdom cards, is easily my favourite aspect of this game. I like the tricksy nature of using these. And it's not like Arcs where you get it at random and then you're kind of strict on what you can do based on that. Here I feel like you have a bit more control over what cards you have. There are ways to manipulate your deck. There are ways to, get your cards back from the board or use certain ones to journey and govern. Kingdom cards can allow you to do stuff with cards. Even your own board potentially can unlock stuff like that. So I felt like there wasn't really many occasions where it's like, oh, I've drawn a really sucky hand of cards. There's not a lot I can do here. You should always at least have 1 or 2 really nice cards in your hand for whatever purpose it is you need, whether it's defense or, for the most part, high value, because high value cards are just generally better in this game. But I like the tricksy nature with the command abilities on there. Good and bad. There is a bad side to it as well. We'll get onto that later. But the good side is that the command, the ambush, the flank, the deadly, all those little abilities allow you to do some really cool shenanigans with these cards. You know, you'll play a couple of cards, you know, during the clashes. You'll be able to get one back later, and it's like, well, that location bonus let me, you know, journey with something from the board rather than my hand. Well, let me journey with that one. That means I can now, you know, get more scrolls. That means I can buy this. That now goes to my hand, so I've got this available to do something else. There's a lot of little cool crafty plays that you can do with, you know, your hand management. You know, I don't want to call it a deck builder because it isn't really. You start with about 10 or so cards, I think. Or was it 10 or 15 cards, something like that? And you don't really acquire more than 4 or 5 in the game if you're fortunate. You might go through the whole game acquiring like 1 or 2 really. So you're not exactly seeing a bunch of new cards in this regard. But at least you're not, unlike Arcs, you're not sort of tied down to what you can potentially score points for just because you didn't happen to draw the right card for it. You know, here you should be able to get by fine. The Kingdom cards, also something I really like. You know, I love the fact that all of these cards are unique, not just in artwork, but also the abilities, and there's a lot of cool stuff in here. I mean, they're all situational to a point. There's maybe a few that are kind of just universally fantastic, but, you know, I haven't noticed too many imbalanced scenarios with that so far with the plays I've had. But I like the fact that you can kind of customize your strategies and what you're doing as the game goes forward. You know, you'll acquire 2 Kingdom cards like in the first couple of rounds, and then after that you might be like, well, I either like the 2 I've got, you know what, this one's kind of done its course. I'm going to have this one now and replace it. But then somebody else grabs a card that you fancy from a previous round, and it's like, at some point I'm going to want that ability. I'll make do with these now. Right, this round I'm going to bid quite high. Your one, over here. Now, give it. And you know, it means that you've got to be careful with locking a card in play for it, because if you feel like you want to put a low card in for that, because then you're not utilizing the low, you're not wasting the low ones in the clashes when you're going to need high values. But then you have to think, well, if this is an ability I want to keep, I'm going to need a card in here to make certain that no one nicks it off me. So you've got that decision space of, you know, do I go low, do I go high? That's a neat little thing. I do wish, though, that there were more than just 2 slots, though, because they've clearly put in other mechanics in this game, and we'll talk about the impact of those later, but, you know, where you've got other things to do, but you've only got 2 slots. I kind of wish that there was at least 3, if not even possibly 4. You know, you could take out certain other elements of this game that I'll talk about later that and not impact it that much, but having more of these Kingdom card slots would just allow you to have more fun with this. And then with expansions, you just give us more of these cards and you could create some really good, flexible, like asymmetric factions. Yes, you're already asymmetric, which is a good thing, but you're only asymmetric in terms of, you know, the tactic tiles, which are one-off abilities that you can create for the use for the game, and your unique cards that you acquire. And even then, you're only going to get so many of these, and there's definitely a little overlap with other players. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I like it. I love the mechanic. I just wish you could do more of it. 2 just feels a little bit on the restrictive side.
Well, that's a lot less fun.
Now, this game gives off a kind of misleading approach that it's not going to be that complex a game. Be warned. It is. It is a pretty complex game. However, I gotta give props where it's due. They've done a fantastic job in trying to make it as, you know, as easy to learn as possible. That doesn't mean this is a gateway or light game. No, this is a heavy game through and through. But the board has a lot of things on it that explain what the phases do and the turn sequence in it. So it tells you in, like, on the board, spring, place bids, do it simultaneously, resolve bids, then in bidding order, place heralds in turn order, simultaneously place cards. It tells you exactly what stage you're at, and you can mark it with a token, so that helps as well. And you've got another token for active player, so you can, if you're willing to keep your game in a sort of regimented fashion of, you know, right, we're in this step, now we're in this step, now we're in this step, you can follow through what's going on pretty well. But that's a good little memory jogger in itself. But on top of that, the rule books, and granted there is one for the big one and one for the solo mode, they are big. I mean, the main one is about 48, 50 odd pages, but it is written very well. There are very few FAQ moments that should arise from this, and most of it will probably just be because you've missed out a rule somewhere, as opposed to it not being explained in the book. There's a lot of pages. You're going to miss out a few rules here and there. but wow, it's worded well. There is pictorial examples of like the components and the anatomy of cards, but then every rule in here has an example. I mean, right down to how you change the turn order track. It's pretty straightforward how it works, but it's got 3/4 of a page showing you how it works. And then another bunch of like, pictorial examples for bidding, and then how you acquire and steal kingdom cards, and then how you play supporters, and then how you have the clashes themselves. There's a lot of stuff in here that is just done really well, and gotta give props. This is one of the best rule books I have seen in gaming. It is really good. Would I have liked there to have been an index? Yes, an index might have helped, but they do have a glossary at the back, which is nice. If anything, the main thing that does kind of let it down a little bit is the fact that the sequence of play, like the summary, the memory joggers and stuff, are on separate big sheets or on the back of the rulebook. This is a game that, for reasons we're going to get onto later, really could have benefited from a player reference aid per player, because I'm not a fan of putting things on the back of the rulebook that are that important, because you want to be using the rulebook to look up rules. But then when you've got things like, these two sheets that you've got to pass around, yes, they're good and the information's on there, but passing these around is a bit of a pain. It's nice when you can just have something in front of you that you can look at, and at least these are easy to read. I mean, like I say, they are good, not gonna deny that they are good, but a lot of games now are starting to take the whole Lisboa thing of maybe having a little booklet in front of you. SETI did it. SETI had a 4-page little mini booklet. That's fantastic for learning the game. I feel like you could have got the important stuff from here into a little booklet for each player so that you can look at the stuff in your own time, because there is a lot for you to absorb. More on that later. And it's, I say it's a small little nitpick. I do wish that that was the case, but yeah, can't deny that this rulebook is excellent. There's a lot of pages, there's a lot to absorb. You're gonna have to spend a fair bit of time going through this to make sure you understand everything. But once you have gone through the rulebook, that's most of the stuff you need to know in your head.
Dear God, what is it like in your funny little brains? It must be so boring.
Right, now we gotta get onto some flaws, and some of it is definitely gonna be down to the group, because one thing that this game is, it's not new player friendly at all. I know I made a big deal about the rulebook being one of the best rulebooks there is, but remember I made the comparison to Arcs earlier. This is definitely on that same bandwagon, where Arcs was very divisive. It was very confrontational. There wasn't a lot of catch-up mechanisms in the game. If your game was going badly, you were kind of just done, and it definitely didn't reward new players. It was really much for the players who were going to play it endlessly as a little group, just themselves. They could have fun with it. Same for this one. This is not new player friendly at all. I mean, I have taught this to a lot of different people who wanted to try the game, and the same problem arises each time. If somebody knows the game better than the other players, the advantage they have is off the scale. And even then, there is a front-loaded amount of information that you've got to teach in this game. The rulebook's great, but there's a lot to teach. You've got a lot of rules, all the different keywords on the cards, those command and flank stuff, you've got to teach them. You've got to teach how the blind bidding and the kingdom cards work. You've got to teach how the clashes work in detail. Then you've got to go over what these council tiles are. Then you've got the autumn actions about govern and journey. You've got the anatomy of the cards in general. And then you've got your ability on here, which is only relevant if you get a certain marker from the game. And then you've got the tactic tiles as well.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Quite a bit to teach. By the time you get going, you're going to have taught quite a fair amount of front-loaded information to the players, and it's going to overwhelm them. You really want this to be a group. It's a group-dependent game. You got a group that's regular, that's going to play this all the time. I think they're going to get more out of it than the casual player that jumps in. Definitely don't put this in front of light gamers. They will be completely bumfounded. But even then, I have put this in front of people who, like me, play heavy games, and just the sheer amount of information at the start is quite tricky to get your head round. This is not helped by the smorgasbord of text you have to read. There is tons of it. All the kingdom cards are basically a mixture of shorthand abilities and a massive novel of text, depending on what the ability is. There's not enough iconography in the game to shorthand some of these abilities. But then on top of that, you've got text on certain cards, particularly the ones you've bought. You've got the free council abilities that you have to constantly keep tabs on. You've then also got the tactic tiles, which honestly I think is one of the weakest elements of the game here. It sounds cool on paper. I'm going to have 4 abilities that are unique to me. They can activate at different times, but once I use it, flip it over, I don't get to use it again. Sounds good on paper. Are you going to teach this game and tell people to read out all 16 of the tiles before you get started? Trust me, that doesn't work. And all of these are pretty, major abilities. They've got a lot of text on them. You've got to try and understand how they work. And some of them can dick around other players, which means you kind of need to have an awareness of what it is. But you can't remember what they are on top of all this, on top of all that, on top of all this.
This is light.
It's too much. The new player isn't going to remember a lot of this stuff, which means they're going to be trailing like crazy throughout the game, and anybody who has an idea of what they're doing will just cream them. There's no way that they will be able to beat them. It's just not going to happen. And that kind of sucks, because for me, I want a game that I can show this to other players, but I can't. I have to reserve this for a group that has played it before and wants to play it multiple times. Otherwise, it's just going to annoy people. And certainly the feedback I've had from other players has been a mix of, oh, I like this game, and I hate this game with a passion. It really is being like Arcs, where it's a bit of a Marmite session.
See, there's 2 sides to every sport.
It almost feels like the game had a streamlined identity and then just tried to bolt on other little things on top, and every time they did, it made the game worse. Apparently, according to some playtesters and developers and that, the game had more stuff on top. What the hell did you have on top that you trimmed out to make this one? Because this already has a fair bit in it. And honestly, I think the tactic tiles and the council board could have been scrapped entirely and not lost much. The tactic tiles just confuse players. There's too much text to keep track of. With 16 of them on the board, it's a bit of a nightmare to try and remember what they do. And the council board, again, 3 more text abilities that players have got to try to remember. It's too much. But they're not even that interesting. One, you literally bin votes for points. Yay. One lets you get supporters back from the lost pile, the bit where they go out of play. Yay. And the other one lets you very slowly put markers on a map to occasionally trigger a location reward, which even if you focus on it to a reasonable extent, you might trigger it twice in the game. If that. Most of the time you might get it once, or you just ignore it entirely. This just feels like a bolted-on affair. It doesn't even feel like a council.
I never get involved in politics.
You don't vote against other players or anything.
You don't vote for kings?
You just put cards down, count up the symbols, and you do the effect based on that. Other players can go in there, and only one of them cares whether you have the most compared to other players or not. This just seems like when you think about how everything else gels with the game really nicely, this is what feels like the most tacked on element. Take this out, take out the tactic tiles, and do what I said earlier. Give me more kingdom card slots. 3, maybe even 4. I would have gladly taken 4 kingdom card slots over the tactic tiles and the council tile any day.
He's out of line, but he's right.
Game length, not what it says on the box. Trust me, 3 or 4 players, this game is going to go to 2.5 to 3 hours easily when you've got new players in. You might be able to get it down to the 2-hour mark with 3 players if they know what they're doing, but seriously, 2 hours is pushing it for any type of guarantee. If you play this to 4 rounds as a short game, then yes, you can keep to the 2 hours, but with new players, no way. I mean, that's not including the teach. Trust me, you're going to need the teach on top, which is going to be at least a good 20 to 30 minutes to get all this information out. And then on top of that, you're going to need at least another 2.5 hours to 3 hours to finish a full game, particularly with 4 players. 2 players you'll keep to this time limit, fine. But honestly, I don't think this game scales well for that. 3 players is the sweet spot, I think, for the game, because 4 players feels a little bit too chaotic with all the cards flipping, because there is no way in hell you can predict what's going to happen when 4 players have got to flip cards in a combat. It just becomes a luck fest at that point, where you might as well just shuffle your cards and dish one in. 2 players is definitely going to be more sort of, back and forth with the players, but then you've only got 2 of you. That just doesn't seem like a very interesting clash, to be honest. 3 seems to be a good kind of like, point in the middle that is the best of both worlds. Not too chaotic, but a little bit of variety and a little bit of extra opposition, but also not just literally one-on-one. You do have to think about another player. Going back to Arcs, we got another problem, the catch-up mechanisms. The Arcs is one of those games where if you fall behind, good luck trying to get back in. You're pretty much subject to pseudo knockout. And it's not just Arcs as his problem. You know, a lot of these confrontational games have it, where basically the term pseudo knockout means that you're not eliminated from the game, you might as well have been though. Where you're basically just going through the motions because you are forced to sit there, but you have no chance of winning, so what's the point? Here, same problem. The only catch-up mechanism in this game is the turn order track, where if you are behind on points, you go last in the round, which means you get to react to what other players are doing. Now, that is good. It is good to go last because you get to act in that way. But it's not enough. I mean, I had a game once where two of us in a game were kind of like on 10 to 12 influence points, and the other player had like 2 or 3 tops. They were about 10 points behind. No chance are you going to recover that. That is physically impossible. And what happens in every single game, particularly with new players, like I said, this is definitely not favoring the new player, is that you're going to have 1 or 2 players at each other's throats for the victory, and the rest might as well not even be there. They're just there as a roadblock, a nuisance to the other players, because they're trying their best to get some points, and they can't, because the leaders are getting more of their cool cards, they're getting more votes on the council, they're getting more stuff in general, and the ones behind just can't keep up. Going last is nice, but it's not enough. You want to go last because you're behind by 1 point to whoever else is ahead of you. Not when you're behind by 5 or 10. It's just not going to happen. And so, you know, a lot of times there's a player who just doesn't feel like they're contributing to anything, and naturally they walk away feeling like they couldn't really do anything useful. And this game just does it every single time. If you've got 4 of you that know the game inside out and can keep yourself some tight scores, you'll get around that problem. But how many people have that set up?
Is this a trick question?
If you're into interactive games, you're going to have this one in spades. You are confronting other players pretty much all the time, whether it's in the blind bidding for the kingdom cards or whether it's in the clashes, particularly the clashes. And so there is an element of mind games that can be played with players, as everybody is putting their cards face down, so you don't know what they're going to do. But that is contrasted with the fact that maybe that aspect was oversold a little bit with this game. Yes, you have some element of not knowing what other players have put down, but there's only so much you can really gauge from what they've put down. There's a lot of cards in this game from your deck. Players have a hand size of 6 to begin with, which is a decent variety of cards, and so, you know, you're thinking, all right, where am I going? Where are they likely to, you know, put their resources? Where are they really going to put their high value cards? Are they going to play the deadly card, which nukes other cards, that sort of thing? You don't really have much to go on. You know, there's people online that will talk about, oh yeah, you know, when you spot somebody who's doing a flanking play and you put this together to destroy them and that, it's like, yeah, you got lucky. Yeah, spotting a flanking play, there's not really much evidence on the table that's going to suddenly tell you that's a thing. There's only 1 card in your deck that has the word flank on it. There's only 1 word in your deck that has the word deadly on it. You know, you can't really predict that these cards are going to come into play, and so a lot of times when we're playing, we find that the whole bluffing aspect and the whole mind game thing just doesn't really come through as strongly as it could.
Between 1 and 3, not including 1 or 3.
But it's not to say that it's completely devoid of those sort of mind games. They are there. It is definitely going to, you know, you're going to have some rounds where, you know, people will surprise each other or will do something quite crafty and fun. But they're fewer and far between. It's not quite as commonplace as, you know, the sort of blurb for the game and what other reviewers are kind of saying about it. From experience, I found that there are a lot of times when it's mostly just flip the card, see what happens, oh look, I put 10, you put 9, therefore by fluke I happen to beat you by 1. Did you know I was going to put the 10 there? No, it just sucks to be you, your high card is now wasted. You know, those sort of things happen more often than the, oh wow, that was so clever moments.
Yes, the number I was thinking of was the letter M.
So with those pros and cons in motion, let's talk about the solo mode. So the solo mode has its own massive rulebook, which you're going to need to absorb, and essentially has you playing against something called the simulacrum or whatever. Basically the AI. I don't know what weird name you give it. It's an AI. This has been designed mostly by Ricky Royal, apparently, and, you know, who's known for doing a few decent solo modes. And this is basically where you play by yourself against one AI opponent that has its own deck of cards, but it has its own kind of scheme and ambition cards that dictate what it's aiming for. Like which regions is it going for? Which cards does it want out of the kingdom card row? And on top of that, you've also got these fog cards that you only put so many of them in the game. They've got negative things that are going to affect you based on where it puts its fog cards, which are basically just face down threat cards. But these are shuffled each round, they come out in different orders, and so they're going to throw little interesting tweaks and spanners in the works for how you're going to approach clashing with the AI. I gotta say, this is a very, very solid solo mode for what this game is. I thought, how the hell are you going to make a solo mode where AI is going to replicate the multiplayer experience well? Not only does it do a very good job of replicating the multiplayer experience, I damn well say it could actually be better than the multiplayer game.
What?
Because most of what you do is the same. You get to do all your kingdom cards, you still do the clashes, you still get to do tricksy stuff with this and all the different actions and the council and stuff. That for you doesn't change. But on top of that, you get to keep the game length down because you could just simply do a 4-round game against the AI and do things relatively quickly. You also get to, most of the multiplayer experience. The fact that the AI has cards that deliberately mislead you at times as to what it's going for substitutes for the whole sort of unexpected mind game thing. But honestly, given that the cards come out mostly random, they've got a little tier system that you adhere to, but for the most part it's a random card. You don't know if it's going to be high, low, or what. That's pretty much the same as when you're playing multiplayer. So honestly, it's kind of hard to say why I'd want to play this with multiplayer again. Maybe a 3-player game, but 2-player, 4-player, I'd rather play this solo, honestly. And a lot of it just comes down to how smooth it is. AIs that are annoying and tricksy to pilot are a problem child for me. There are some, like, you get them in the Mind Clash games and a few of the more other complicated Euros where the AI takes so much effort to pilot that I just can't be bothered with it. Here, though, straightforward, right? Yes, it's a big rulebook, but again, lots of pictorial examples, and the back half of the rulebook is mainly about how to tweak the AI. The main part of the rulebook teaches you the standard mode, and this back section called the Forge basically lets you use a smorgasbord of these little cards to tailor how the AI is going to behave during a game, and this lets you tweak around with the difficulty settings and such. I mean, the replay value in the AI system alone is insane. For that £55 you're spending, a good amount of chunk of value is in that solo mode. Although, that also brings up a little bit of a negative because half of the stuff in this box, in terms of its cards and what you do, is the solo mode. So if you don't intend to play this game solo, you're wasting a good chunk of money and components on stuff you're never going to use. Yes, you've got a co-op and a competitive way to add the AI into normal games. That's just getting weird at that point, and the problem is every time that a Kickstarter project comes out and says, oh yeah, you can play this solo and competitive with an AI and solo co-op with an AI, you gotta admit that most of the time those extra bolt-on modes have not been play tested well. Rarely do they work, and certainly I've not tried trying to combine the AI into a multiplayer game, so don't quote me on that. But when you get things going, all you've really got to do with this AI is you've got to reveal a threat card. Tells you what to do, tells you how many fog cards are going to go on the table. You put them out. It has a deck of cards. It doesn't have a hand size or anything like that, so anything that manipulates its deck basically deals with the top card of the deck. Nice and straightforward. You then reveal a ambition card, which gives you a priority order in terms of the locations on the board and the type of kingdom card. You reveal, it has tokens for the bidding value of kingdom cards. You just compare your card to its. Whenever it wins something, it goes by a simple 3-section priority order, nice and quick. And then once you get into the clashes, you then flip over another card, which tells you where to put its little supporter tokens out. And then you resolve the clashes exactly like multiplayer. Flip the cards over, try tricksy abilities of your own, resolve any abilities that their cards might have. And that's mostly it. It pretty much does next to nothing in the autumn, unless it's got council votes, which it does build up quite a lot of as the game goes on, and that's mainly just from its tokens. It gets way more votes in the council than any player can physically get in any way, shape, or form, so yeah, it's gonna munchkin that like crazy. But the winter effects, pretty much nothing happens, so it's very easy to pilot. And the board that it's got clearly labeled out sections for the different decks that you need to use. When I played this solo after playing a bunch of multiplayer games, I was so shocked on how easy it was to deal with. Gotta give kudos to Ricky and everybody who designed this. It's so much smoother than the multiplayer game at times, which is kind of weird. And then add on to the fact that you can just tailor it at the back with, you know, all these different forge ones. I mean, you've got some pre-built ones that you can use that use these particular cards, but you can forge your own randomly, you can forge a custom one, and there's a lot of those little cards that let you tweak the AI. It almost feels like the AI in the solo mode should have been the game to begin with. Like, scrap the whole multiplayer element entirely and just stick with the solo mode. It's that good. And when I say it's that good, obviously you still have to enjoy the base nature of the game to begin with in order to say, oh yeah, I can recommend it. But, you know, if you didn't enjoy it as a multiplayer game, you're not really going to enjoy it as a solo game to that much extent. But yeah, wow, as a design, it is fluid, it is smooth, it has got good replay value, it's excellent. But you do have to like the other aspects of the game. You have to accept that there is a random element to whether you win or lose a clash, because you've got no idea what kind of cards the AI is going to put down. And even then, you know, the fact that you don't have other players there means you can't do some of those little mind games with each other, even though, as I said, those are somewhat few and far between. It's also an extra set of rules you've got to learn on top of the other huge set of rules, so there's that aspect. But if you're not going to play this solo, half the box is pretty much useless to you. So I have been comparing this a lot to Arcs, and that's because the two games have a similar feel, and I think the approach to both games is going to be the same for players. They're both very confrontational, they're both in-your-face interactive aggressive, they both use a tricksy card system, they both have cards you can buy to make yourself a little bit more asymmetric, they're both you know, fairly lengthy games, you know, they're both definitely Marmite games in how they approach, and I've had the Marmite response here. Some people love it, some people hated it. Me, I'm kind of more in the middle, but more vying towards good. There's more good here than bad. It does look great on the table with the artwork, even if the boards are a bit basic, but the cards are great. I like the tricksy card system that you have. You have more control here than you ever did in Arcs, and you know, the artwork is great to look at, and I like the fact that you can acquire different cards as well. The Kingdom cards, probably the highlight of the whole game, being able to tailor yourself even more with these, but I do wish they gave you more than just 2 slots. 2 slots isn't enough. And given that I've said that the tiles here are too much for people to take note of, and the council board just feels like a tacked on waste of space, I would have rather had 3 or 4 Kingdom card slots and just had that. Imagine how streamlined this would be if you took out the council, took out the tactic tiles, and instead gave me more Kingdom card slots. The game would be smoother, I think the game would be better, you would still retain the asymmetric nature of the factions with the cards that you could buy, you know, maybe throw in a couple extra cards that you could buy and make it easier to purchase them, because it is quite a decent amount of effort you have to go through in order to buy them. I think that would have worked out better, but as I say, God knows what was in this before they trimmed it down to that level. But other good things besides, you know, the card system is cool. I do like the fact that the solo mode is solid in its design, how you can have an AI with this much customization that is this easy to pilot. You know, that, you know, deserves a round of applause in itself. But then also the fact that as much as there is too much for people to absorb, too many tactic tile text, too much Kingdom card text, too much other text and abilities and all this stuff, a personal reference aid would have gone like 100 miles to making this a little bit easier for players. But the rule books are that solid where, you know, I can't give enough praise that for something this complex, you know, a bad rulebook could have shut the game down immediately, but these are written very well and illustrated very well to make life a bit easier for you. But let's not beat around the bush. This is a flawed game despite having a lot of good stuff in it. It is definitely a complex game. It is definitely a long game, longer than the box says by far when it comes to free, especially 4 players. Yes, some of the rounds are simultaneous, but there's a lot of AP potential and a lot of room for this to take a while, particularly with the action steps. So, you know, and even just halting the game to resolve an ability and such, it does take its time. And, you know, the lack of a catch-up mechanism, you know, the whole turn order thing is not enough. If you're falling behind on points, you might as well quit at that point. There's just a lot of things in here that do get in the way, but I do like it, and I can see a market for it. But 3 things to consider. Do you like confrontational, in-your-face games where you could have pseudo knockout? If you don't, stay away from this game. Are you intending to teach this to new players on a regular basis as opposed to have the same group play it? Then stay away from this game. You really need the same people playing this as a small little niche group, because this is definitely a very niche game. And also, do you intend to play this solo? Because if you don't intend to play it solo at all, you're wasting half of the value of this game, because half of the components and half of the actual value here is the solo mode. So just playing it multiplayer is negating a lot of what's in this box. It could be half the size if you took out the solo mode. That's how much of the stuff is in there to do with it. So bear that in mind. If those things are going to put you off, then I say stay away, because it's not for you. But if you are able to say, yes, I'm going to have the same group all the time and I'll play it solo and I love these kind of games, then by all means jump in. For me though, it's a 6 out of 10, which is above average. I can't recommend it at its current state, especially for how niche it is, but I can see the appeal for some people. Not 9, 10 out of 10 territory. I think that's going a bit far and ignoring some of these flaws here. But I could see 7s and 8s popping up with people saying that this is an enjoyable game. Totally could see that. And I would play this again. If you've got people who sort of know what they're doing and we're not in a teaching game, then I would jump in and play this. But it's not one that I think I would keep. It's not one that I'm going to suggest when it comes out. And as much as I think the solo mode is fantastic, in fact, if you check my player scaling, as much as I give this an overall 6 out of 10, I would actually give the solo mode at least a 7, because I think the solo mode makes this game and actually beats out the multiplayer game in many respects. I don't like the game enough to want to play this solo on a regular basis. I've got enough games that I can play solo that I get more of a kick out of. You know, with its fairly pasted theme and, you know, and with its, you know, kind of almost pseudo-random element of the cards against the AI. Yes, you can predict what they're going to do to some extent, but it's still random cards. You don't know what's going to happen. You know, those sort of things do put me off a little bit. So, you know, it's got more good than bad. But bear those points in mind. It's going to be a Marmite game for sure. You're going to hear some fanboys rave about it like crazy. You're going to hear people, well actually you're not going to hear people hate on it, because frankly, you always hear the ones who love it over the ones who hate it. But yeah, you know, evaluate for yourself. What do you think? Is it a game for you or is it not? I hope this video has at least been useful to help you figure it out. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the game page. Of course, thank you to the Patreons who help make this channel possible by allowing me to grab review copies and, you know, jump into these games. You know, there's some big stuff to come out in the future, like Luthier, for example. So your support makes this channel continue the way it is. But of course, just leave a comment below. You know, you've played this game, then by all means, I'm sure you're going to have agreements and disagreements with me. So let's keep it civil, but we can debate this until the cows come home. But, you know, let me know. Is this the kind of game that you like? Do you think the ARX comparison is fair? Do you think that this is the game you're going to like? You know, does your group setup allow you to like fit in with what you think this game's going to be like, or is this going to put you off? If so, what are the reasons? You know, by all means, get your comments down below. It's a niche game for sure, but I'm sure there's plenty to talk about. So until next time, regardless of what type of crown you're wearing on your head, whether it's made out of gold or tin, it's still only a game. So bye for now.